Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Welcome to Dark Poutine. I am Count Mike Brown.
And I'm Matthew.
Yeah, oh. So we're not doing anything fun.
I'm really bad at voices.
Yeah, well. You're bad at your own voice. So it's spooky season, Matthew.
It is, and I'm going to love this episode.
You are?
Yeah.
I was considering doing it with Morgan to let you off the hook because, you know.
So I'll be... Okay, so first of all, I don't believe in any of this stuff that it's real.
Oh, I'm aware. You let me know this whenever you can.
But I love the fun of it all.
Yep.
And I love these stories and myths through history that frankly, keep me entertained and make good movies sometimes.
There you go.
Right?
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
Welcome to a very special Halloween edition of Dark Poutine. This year, we're also celebrating our 7th anniversary. Wow, thank you so much for listening. Over the years, we've explored the darkest corners of Canadian crime and history, but tonight, we're widening the lens a bit to take you on a ghostly journey around the world. In the spirit of the spookiest time of year, we'll dive into the eerie world of hauntings, ghosts, and of course, poltergeists, those noisy, mischievous spirits that have haunted houses, thrown objects, and terrified families across different cultures for centuries. Buckle up for a global tour of unsettling encounters and unexplained phenomena that have left their mark in folklore, history, and for some, reality. Get ready to be both intrigued and chilled to the bone. This is Dark Poutine episode 341, Halloween Road Trip, Hauntings, Ghosts, and Poltergeists Around the World. Oh my. Matthew, do you have an idea of what a ghost is versus a poltergeist?
Well, they're both the same thing. Somebody's overactive imagination.
Oh, bird! Sorry, but I'm going to get ghost nerdy. Nah. While poltergeists and ghosts are often lumped together in paranormal discussions, they're actually quite distinct phenomena with some key differences. Let's start with poltergeist. The term poltergeist comes from German, literally meaning noisy ghost. However, despite the name, poltergeists aren't necessarily the spirits of deceased individuals. Instead, they're often considered manifestations of psychic energy or disturbances. Poltergeists are known for their mischievous and sometimes destructive behavior. They make their presence known through physical actions, moving objects, creating loud noises, slamming doors, or even starting fires. These activities start small and gradually intensify over time, potentially becoming dangerous.
Starting small and then gradually intensifying over time, potentially becoming dangerous, sounds like a teenager in a house to me.
Yeah, pretty much.
Except a poltergeist or ghost doesn't have a curfew and can start fires without matches, unlike the...
Right.
Mr. No Fun over here.
One fascinating aspect of poltergeist activity is that it's often associated with a specific person, usually a teenager or young adult, rather than a particular location. Some theories suggest that poltergeists are actually a form of unconscious psychokinesis, the ability to move objects with the mind, manifested by a living person under some form of stress. This connection to a living individual is a crucial differentiator from traditional ghost hauntings. On the other hand, ghosts are generally understood to be the spirits of deceased individuals. Unlike poltergeists, ghosts are often tied to specific locations, such as where they lived or died. They typically make their presence known through visual or auditory manifestations, appearing as apparitions, creating cold spots, or making sounds. Ghosts are usually passive in nature, rarely interacting physically with their environment like poltergeists do. Another crucial difference lies in the energy patterns associated with these phenomena. Ghost energy tends to be continuous over time, while poltergeist energy builds up, reaches a climax, and then subsides before building again. This cyclical nature of poltergeist activity is another distinguishing feature. Regarding how they affect the living, ghosts may cause fear or unease, but they're generally not considered violent. Poltergeists, however, can be more aggressive and potentially harmful, causing both physical and psychological distress. Interestingly, the methods for dealing with these phenomena also differ. Some believe ghosts can often be sent away through religious ceremonies or rituals. Being more complex and potentially tied to living individuals, poltergeists are more challenging to address. Resolving poltergeist activity often involves identifying the agent, the person unknowingly causing the disturbance, and addressing their emotional or psychological state. It's important to note that while these distinctions are commonly accepted in paranormal circles, the existence of ghosts and poltergeists remains a matter of belief and speculation rather than scientific fact. The concepts continue to fascinate and intrigue, fueling countless stories, investigations, and debates in our ongoing exploration of the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, right? These are all a bit of fun for me, and it is great at spooky time, like Halloween or campfire stories or movies.
You must be a real stick in the mud at horror movies.
No, movies are great. They're fun, right?
Yeah.
I like to be scared. But yeah, any sort of documentary on these things, I'm like, yeah.
We talked about Poltergeist before here on Dark Poutine. The first time was in episode 66, The Great Amherst Mystery, where we first met Morgan Knudsen, with whom I now co-host Supernatural Circumstances. The Great Amherst Mystery unfolded in 1878 in Amherst, Nova Scotia, centering around a young girl named Esther Cox. The strange occurrences began after Esther experienced a traumatic incident involving an alleged assault on her by a local man. Following this event, bizarre happenings started to unfold in her household. Esther's family and other visitors reported mysterious knocking and banging sounds, and objects seemed to move independently. Esther herself began experiencing unsettling seizures that caused her body to swell. The situation escalated to the point where the family sought help from a doctor. Interestingly, bedsheets began moving mysteriously while he was present, eerie messages appeared on the walls, and fires started out of nowhere.
I tell you, if my bed sheets started moving, I'd have a firm conversation with my man-mate about how well he's washing them or not.
Oh dear.
You didn't wash my bed sheets, so now they've gotten up and walked off on their own. Oh, no.
I'd assume most teenage boys' bed sheets practically could probably move on their own.
Not mine. My mom made sure that things were crisp and clean. As Esther's story gained traction, an actor named Walter Hubble became intrigued and decided to investigate further. He moved in with Esther's family and claimed to have witnessed numerous paranormal events firsthand. His experiences inspired him to write a book about the phenomenon, quickly becoming popular among those fascinated by the supernatural. Esther's life took a tumultuous turn during this period. She attempted to share her story through a speaking tour, but not everyone was supportive. She even faced legal trouble and briefly ended up in jail due to accusations of an arson. She tried to burn down someone's barn. Strangely enough, the ghostly activity seemed to cease after all these dramatic events. In retrospect, opinions about the Great Amherst Mystery remain divided. Some researchers suggest that it may have been a hoax, with Esther possibly orchestrating the tricks herself. They also question Hubble's reliability as a source since he had a book to promote. Ultimately, the true nature of what transpired in Amherst may only partially be understood. Still, it certainly makes for a captivating story that has inspired plays, books, and discussions about potential film adaptations, not to mention podcast episodes. In episode 247, we covered the Caledonia Mills Spook Farm, again in Nova Scotia, centered around another troubled young woman, this time in the early 1920s. The MacDonald family, including their adopted daughter Mary Ellen, faced a series of bizarre incidents that ultimately led them to abandon their home. The farm gained notoriety for spontaneous fires and strange occurrences like cattle being moved mysteriously and milk mixed with ashes. As the news spread, the site attracted journalists and paranormal investigators, including some attention from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Some, like Harold Whidden and Detective Peachy Carroll, reported eerie experiences including sensations of being slapped by unseen forces. Central to the mystery is Mary Ellen, whom investigator Dr. Walter Franklin Prince believed was the source of the poltergeist activity. This theory haunted her throughout her life, earning her the nickname Mary Ellen Spook and leading to her confinement in an asylum for years. Various theories have emerged to explain the haunting, from scientific to supernatural. One suggested that radio waves from nearby towers caused the fires, though this seems implausible today. Even though the original buildings are gone, local lore warns that taking anything from the property could result in your house burning down. A chilling reminder of the unexplained events that once terrified this Nova Scotia family and continue to intrigue us. I expanded on this story in my latest book, Strange, Spooky, and Supernatural, where I also covered the Seaford poltergeist, known as Popper the Poltergeist, for its propensity, among other things, to pop the tops of various bottles of liquid and spill their contents on the floor of the Herman home in Seaford, Long Island, New York. You'll have to buy my book to learn more about that case and that of Borley Rectory, allegedly the most haunted property in England, which I researched in part at the archives of the Society for Psychical Research at the library at Cambridge University. Ghosts, being more passive than poltergeists, can also be quite terrifying. Remember the story of Marie-Joseph Corriveau, better known as La Corriveau, in episode 216? She was a fascinating figure who has haunted Quebec's folklore for centuries. Her story began in 1763 when she was accused of murdering her second husband, Louis-Étienne Dodier. You might think this is just another run-of-the-mill murder case, but oh boy, it's so much more than that. Le Corriveau's tale perfectly blends historical fact and spine-tingling legend. After being found guilty of murder, she wasn't just executed, she was sentenced to an unusually cruel punishment. British authorities who were running the show then decided to make an example of her, and they hanged her body in an iron cage at a busy crossroads, leaving it there for 5 whole weeks. Talk about a gruesome warning.
You have to hand it to the British back then.
Yeah.
If they weren't hanging you, they were thinking of new ways to make your death just a little longer.
A little more embarrassing and a little more excruciating.
All in the name of justice, of course.
After her death, Le Corriveau's story took on a life of its own. Rumors started flying faster than witches on broomsticks, and some said she had killed not just one, but 7 husbands. Others whispered that she was a witch or descended from a famous poisoner. Her ghost story became a staple of Quebecois folklore, with people claiming to see her specter still trapped in that iron cage haunting the crossroads at night. One of the most famous ghost stories about Le Corriveau involves a poor fellow named Dubé. As the tale goes, Dubé was minding his own business one night when he encountered Le Corriveau's ghost. She supposedly climbed onto his back, cage and all, and demanded he carry her across the St. Lawrence River to join a witch's sabbath. The legend of Le Corriveau has become so ingrained in Quebec's culture that it's inspired countless books, plays, and even operas. But in recent years, there's been a shift in how people view her story. Many now see Le Corriveau as a victim of her time, possibly spousal abuse, and indeed of an unfair legal system. Her tale has evolved from a simple ghost story to a complex historical tragedy that still resonates with people today. So next time you're in Quebec City and you hear a strange noise in the night, remember it might be the wind whistling through Le Corriveau's cage, or maybe, just maybe, it's Le Corriveau herself seeking justice after all these years. Le Corriveau's story is one example of what might be called a residual haunting. These are ghostly occurrences that seem to repeat the same actions over and over, like a spirit that always walks in the same path at the same time. The idea is that these aren't conscious entities, but more like echoes from the past playing on a loop. The best way I have found to describe residual hauntings is what parapsychologists might call the stone tape theory. It's a fascinating idea that has been floating around in paranormal circles for decades. It suggests that certain places can record and replay events from the past like a supernatural VCR. The theory goes like this. Imagine you're in an old castle or historic building. Suddenly, you see a ghostly figure walk through a wall or hear unexplained footsteps. According to the stone tape theory, what you're experiencing isn't a traditional ghost with which you can interact, but rather a replay of past events that's been recorded into the stone walls or floor. Here's how it supposedly works. During times of high emotion or trauma, like a violent death, the theory claims that energy from these events can be imprinted into the surrounding materials, especially things like quartz or limestone. Then, under the right conditions, these recordings can be played back, appearing as ghostly apparitions or sounds to people who are sensitive to them. It's important to note that this isn't considered a scientific theory. It's more of a speculative idea popular among ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts. The concept has existed for over a century but gained traction after a 1972 BBC drama called The Stone Tape brought the idea to the mainstream. Of course, there are many questions and criticisms about this theory. For one, there's no scientific evidence that emotions or even events can be recorded into stone or any other material. And even if they could, how could they be preserved and potentially played back? I'm sure, Matthew, you have an interesting take on this one.
I actually find sort of the idea of haunted technology really fascinating. Because it came about sort of when electricity was invented, right? And I think maybe these stories more reflect someone's inability to let go of the past, sort of projecting unresolved emotions or trauma onto devices that store memories. So when somebody experiences loss, they may interpret glitches or messages as signs from the beyond.
Sure.
Not because the technology is haunted, but it mirrors their emotional state. And, for me, it's less about real supernatural forces and more about, something deeper, the struggle with grief and memory and the need for closure.
The world of alleged ghostly encounters with deceased relatives is filled with poignant and often comforting stories that defy straightforward explanations. These experiences, while deeply personal, share common threads that resonate with many who have lost loved ones. Consider the story of Emma, a young woman from rural England who woke one night to find her deceased grandmother sitting at the foot of her bed. The apparition appeared as solid and lifelike as Emma remembered, wearing her favorite floral dress. With a warm smile, her grandmother assured Emma not to worry about an upcoming job interview, promising everything would work out fine. The next day, buoyed by this otherworldly encouragement, Emma aced the interview and landed her dream job. Similarly, Mark, a man in his late 40s, shared an experience shortly after his father's passing. Driving home late one night, overwhelmed with grief, Mark was suddenly enveloped by the familiar scent of his father's pipe tobacco. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw what appeared to be his father sitting in the back seat, offering a reassuring nod. Though the vision lasted only a moment, Mark described an immediate sense of calm and acceptance washing over him. These encounters often manifest in various ways. Some report visual apparitions, like Emma's grandmother or Mark's father. Others describe auditory experiences, like hearing the voices of their departed loved ones offering guidance or comfort. Like Mark's experience with his father's tobacco scent, olfactory sensations are also common. Some individuals even report physical sensations, such as a gentle touch on the shoulder or a comforting embrace from an unseen presence. Dream visitations are another frequently reported phenomenon. Many people describe vivid, lifelike dreams featuring deceased relatives that feel markedly different from ordinary dreams, often leaving a lasting impact upon waking. These nocturnal encounters can be so vivid that they blur the line between dreams and waking reality. One particularly moving account comes from Sarah, who had recently lost her mother, describing waking up one night to find her room filled with the scent of her mother's favorite perfume. As she opened her eyes, a misty figure at the foot of her bed gradually took on the form of her mother. The apparition didn't speak, but smiled lovingly before fading away. For Sarah, this experience brought an overwhelming sense of peace and closure, helping her navigate the difficult journey of grief. While skeptics might attribute these experiences to the mind's attempt to process loss or the power of wishful thinking, many who have had such encounters find them profoundly meaningful and comforting. Whether these are genuine paranormal occurrences or complex psychological phenomena, they often play a significant role in how individuals come to terms with the loss of their loved ones, offering solace and sometimes even guidance from beyond the veil of death.
Soon after my father died, I had extraordinarily vivid dreams about him visiting me.
Yeah.
Like, where I woke up, I'm like, that is the most real dream that I've ever had in my life. Like, it felt like he had been there. But they were just dreams, and they're vivid because I was at a heightened emotional state.
Yeah, especially in regard to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
It isn't just the spirits of deceased humans that allegedly haunt us after they're gone. There are scores of easily discovered stories about people being visited by their pets who've passed over the Rainbow Bridge. I've been visited several times by my cat Donner, who died tragically when I was living in my last place in Surrey. For months after, I saw his tail passing around corners just out of the corner of my eye. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me for sure. After Waffles and Egg, my two newest cats, came to live with me, I was playing World of Warcraft at my desk in the living room one evening when I realized I needed to go to the washroom. I got up from my seat and noticed a black cat at my feet. I said, "Hello, Egg," and walked down the hallway. As I passed my bedroom, I looked inside, and there, sleeping soundly on the bed together, were Egg and Waffles. I immediately returned to the living room thinking a neighbor's cat had somehow gotten in, but there was no sign of the cat that I'd seen. I've since wondered whether it was Donner saying hello. He has not visited since, and I have moved. Perhaps the apartment's new tenants are being intermittently visited by the apparition of my deceased black cat. After a quick break, we'll return with one of my favorite poltergeist stories from the UK, which I believe is one of history's most compelling cases. And we are back. Matthew, any thoughts other than wanting to leave and never do this podcast again?
I like being the rationalist in this in this relationship we have, Mike.
Oh, so you're saying I'm irrational? Okay.
All of this for me is either misunderstanding or unknown scientific reasons or hoaxes or mass hysteria.
Well, that's what I think too.
Or one of my favorite terms, folie à deux. Do you know Folie à deux?
Yes, I do. It's a movie that Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga are in that apparently really sucks.
Oh, really? That's so sad. I wanted that movie to be really good.
Well, I'm just going by what other people said. I will probably see it anyway.
Well, that's sad because they're both great actors. But anyway, being a rationalist doesn't stop me from having fun and suspending disbelief for entertainment.
Yeah, there you go. It's time to dive into one of the most famous and controversial cases of all, the Enfield Poltergeist. In the late 1970s, a seemingly ordinary house in Enfield, North London became the center of intense paranormal activity. Strange knocking sounds, furniture moving on its own, and even alleged possession gripped the Hodgson family, especially young Janet. This case caught the attention of investigators, skeptics, and the media, making headlines across the UK and beyond. But was it indeed a haunting or something else entirely? Enfield is a suburban area in the northern part of Greater London, England. Historically, it was part of the county of Middlesex before becoming part of the capital as London expanded. Enfield is a diverse and vibrant community that blends modern urban living with a rich history. The area has long roots, with settlements dating back to Roman times and the medieval period, and it was mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086. For those unaware, the Domesday Book is a comprehensive survey of land and resources in England commissioned by William the Conqueror. It was created to assess the kingdom's wealth and assets for taxation purposes and provides a detailed record of land ownership, property, livestock, and resources in the aftermath of the Norman conquest. Enfield is known for its green spaces, including parks like Trent Country Park and Fordy Hall Estate, a historic manor house and museum. It also has a strong industrial history, with the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield Lock being a significant employer for many years. Today the area is more residential, with a mix of older Victorian houses and modern developments. Despite its bustling suburban feel, Enfield maintains a sense of community, with local markets, shops, and various cultural influences. It's also well connected to central London, making it an appealing place for commuters. The infamous Enfield poltergeist haunting occurred in a modest council house at 284 Green Street and has since become one of the most studied and debated cases in paranormal history. Before the poltergeist activity began, the Hodgson family lived a relatively ordinary life. The family consisted of single mother Peggy Hodgson, 47, and her 4 children. Margaret, 13, Janet, 11, Johnny, 10, and Billy, 7. According to an article in the Psi Encyclopedia on the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, website, Peggy Hodgson was considered by those who knew her to be a pleasant and conscientious person, overcoming financial insecurity to do her best for her children. Margaret was serious and reserved. The oldest boy, Johnny, was only at home during the school holidays and some weekends since he boarded at a special school for troubled children. Billy suffered from a severe speech defect, but was a typical little boy in other respects. Mrs. Hodgson's brother, John Burcombe, a hospital worker, lived nearby at 272 Green Street with his wife Sylvia and 2 children, Paul and Denise. The 2 families appeared to be close, and John was supportive of the Hodgsons. Janet, often at the center of the haunting phenomena in the Hodgson home, was described as a lively, outgoing girl. She was mischievous and full of energy. Like many children her age, she attended school and enjoyed playing with her siblings and friends. The Hodgson household, although struggling financially after Peggy's separation from her husband, was a typical working-class family of the time, facing the usual challenges of life but nothing particularly extraordinary until the strange occurrences turned their world upside down beginning in August of 1977. The first strange occurrence happened one evening when Peggy Hodgson heard odd noises coming from her daughter's bedroom. Upon investigation, she witnessed an inexplicable and terrifying sight. A chest of drawers seemed to be moving on its own, inching towards the door, as if propelled by an invisible force. When Peggy attempted to push the dresser back, it wouldn't budge, adding to her growing fear and confusion. Alarmed by these events, the Hodgson family fled their home and sought help from their neighbors, Vic and Peggy Nottingham, who lived across the street. Responding to the family's distress, Vic Nottingham entered the Hodgson house to investigate. He too reported hearing strange noises echoing throughout the home, corroborating the family's account and lending credence to their fears. As the situation escalated, the Hodgsons called the police for assistance. According to the SPR archives at Cambridge University Library, when officers W.P.C. Heaps and P.C. Hyams arrived at around 1 a.m., they witnessed an incident that defied explanation. Heaps claimed to have seen a chair move clear across the room of its own accord. Speaking to SPR investigators, W.P.C. Heaps later said, quote, "It came off the floor, nearly a half inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't. It didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all." End quote. Despite this unsettling observation, the police concluded that the matter was beyond their jurisdiction and not something they could address. In the days that followed, marbles and Lego building blocks flew through the air, thrown by an unseen hand, and observed by both the family and the Nottinghams. Despite visits from council officials, clergymen, and others, the strange events persisted. On September 4th, Mrs. Nottingham contacted the Daily Mirror, hoping they could connect her with someone who might help. Reporter Douglas Bentz and photographer Graham Morris came to investigate, and both witnessed objects flying. Morris later described being struck on the forehead by a fast-moving Lego piece, leaving a bruise that lasted for days. Then, on September 7th, senior reporter George Fallows and photographer David Thorpe also visited the house.
Yeah, so now, before we get carried away going, oh my God, real journalists saw it all happen.
It was real.
Right? Saw Lego flying across the room. So for those who don't live in the UK, the Daily Mirror is the king of the tabloids.
Yeah, I know.
You know, it's not the Times, it's not the Guardian. You know, think of the Mirror as the National Enquirer with
Think of the National Enquirer with a concussion.
You know, think Loch Ness Monster, alien abductions, Princess Diana conspiracy theories.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
That sounds like my kind of magazine. These initial events marked the beginning of an 18-month-long ordeal for the Hodgson family. The Daily Mirror's reporter, Fallows, sensing a story of potentially extraordinary proportions, reached out to the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, of which I am now a member. His call was fielded by Eleanor O'Keefe, the organization's secretary, who recognized the potential significance of the case. O'Keefe, in turn, contacted Maurice Gross, a recent addition to the SPR's ranks, who had expressed a keen interest in investigating paranormal occurrences. Gross was far from a typical paranormal investigator. A successful inventor with numerous innovations to his name, including the now ubiquitous rotating advertising billboard, he had come to the field of psychical research through personal tragedy. In August 1976, Gross's daughter, Janet, had lost her life in a motorcycle accident, succumbing to severe head injuries. In the wake of this devastating loss, Gross experienced a series of coincidences that he found deeply meaningful, awakening in him a passionate interest in phenomena that defied conventional explanation. On September 5th, Gross made his first visit to the Enfield house. His approach was measured and practical. He advised Peggy Hodgson to maintain her composure and meticulously document any unusual occurrences. It didn't take long for the case to take a dramatic turn. 3 days later, on September 8th, Gross returned to the house with 3 Daily Mirror reporters. During this visit, they collectively witnessed a loud crash that seemed to have no earthly source. This event proved to be a turning point for Gross, convincing him of the authenticity of the Hodgson family's claims and cementing his commitment to investigate the case thoroughly. As Gross continued his visits to the Enfield house, the phenomena escalated in frequency and strangeness. Witnesses, including Maurice Gross himself, the Hodgson family, Peggy Nottingham's father, and several Daily Mirror reporters and photographers, observed a catalog of inexplicable events. Marbles would fly through the air, landing on the floor without rolling as if defying the laws of physics. Doors and drawers would open of their own accord as if manipulated by invisible hands. Door chimes would swing without any apparent cause. Various objects, from teaspoons to cardboard boxes and even a fish tank lid, would suddenly jump or move. The sheer number of witnesses, many of whom were unrelated to the family and had no apparent reason to fabricate such claims, lent credibility to the case. The growing intensity and complexity of the Enfield poltergeist case soon necessitated additional expertise. An author and experienced paranormal investigator, Guy Playfair, answered the SPR's call for assistance. Born in the mid-1930s, Playfair spent his early career as a freelance journalist and translator, working in Brazil for over a decade. During this time, he became interested in psychical research and began investigating paranormal phenomena. His experiences in Brazil led him to write his first book on the subject, The Flying Cow, which explored various psychic and supernatural occurrences in the country. Upon returning to England in the 1970s, Playfair joined the SPR, where he continued to pursue his passion for investigating unexplained phenomena. He and Gross were the perfect pair to investigate this case. On September 12th, Playfair arrived at the house accompanied by Rosalind Morris from BBC Radio 4's The World This Weekend program. What began that day would evolve into one of British history's most comprehensive paranormal investigations. For over a year, Playfair and Gross would make an astounding 180 visits to the Enfield house, including 25 all-night vigils. Their dedication and the sheer volume of their investigative work would cement the Enfield poltergeist case as one of the most well-documented and controversial paranormal events of the 20th century.
Here comes Matthew's yes, but.
Okay.
Here's my big butt. That Rosalind, or Roz, defended her work, but she never said that it was ghosts or paranormal activity. She said she couldn't explain some of the things. I was looking on the BBC website. They have a section called The Reunion, where they revisit old stories.
Yeah.
Just a few quotes, and if you look at the wording, right? Mm-hmm. Here's one quote. The journalist admits that at the beginning, she herself was extremely skeptical. So you think, oh, she's skeptical at the beginning, but she believed labor. But then it goes on to say...
When? Labor?
Later.
Yeah.
And then you say later... sorry. Here's a quote from that website. The journalist admits that at the beginning, she herself was extremely skeptical. And so you read that and you think, oh, she was skeptical at the beginning, but maybe she believed later. Looking out for any ways in which trickery could be involved. But she found that Mrs. Hodgson to be sincere and undoubtedly very frightened. Okay, and then
so that doesn't mean Mrs. Hodgson didn't believe in what was going on.
No, but it also doesn't say that Roz Morris believes what was going on. Right. And then another one, Morris went upstairs and it appeared something had moved a chair across the room, a distance of about 9 feet. She felt this would have been impossible for the girls to do as they were actually in bed. She said at the time, something chucked the chair across the room. I'm convinced of that. Well, yes, something must have, right?
This is how I would write this article too, just so you know.
Like maybe the rope you didn't see, or something.
Right.
So it's so funny because often when people read things, and it's interesting how things are written often, right? Of she was initially skeptical, stuff like that. But if you keep digging and look for, this journalist who works for the BBC said 100% no, it had to be paranormal activity. She never does.
Nope. Side note. Famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were only tangentially involved in this case for a single day, unlike the extended investigation portrayed in the film The Conjuring 2. They typically wanted a case all to themselves and were allegedly put off that other, more reputable parapsychologists were involved. Playfair and Gross's work included numerous photographs and tape recordings. The haunting featured various instances of objects moving seemingly on their own. Marbles and Lego pieces were seen flying through the air at high speeds, appearing to originate from walls or windows. A teapot shook vigorously on a cabinet without any external vibration, while metal spoons bent and a metal teapot lid became deformed. Furniture also exhibited strange behavior, with a bedside lampshade tilting and straightening itself and a settee levitating and overturning in front of several witnesses. Doors opened and closed by themselves, as did a toilet lid when no one was nearby. Kitchen cupboard doors slid open on their own, and tubular door chimes swung from side to side multiple times. Mysterious footsteps were heard when no one else was present, and knocks, bangs, and crashes were reported that could not be attributed to plumbing, vibration, or other external sources. Perhaps most startling were the reported levitations of 11-year-old Janet, who was said to have been lifted and deposited in different locations at various times. Her sister Margaret, aged 12, experienced being held fast by an unknown force. The haunting also included instances of objects disappearing and reappearing in different rooms, small fires starting and extinguishing themselves without causing damage, and the unexplained appearance of water. Apparitions were reportedly seen, both partial and full, and ordinarily reliable electrical equipment such as tape recorders and cameras often failed to function properly. Many of these events were witnessed by individuals who had no prior connection to the Hodgson family, including John Rainbow, a local tradesman, Richard Gross, Maurice's son and a solicitor, and Hazel Short, a road crossing council employee. The variety and frequency of the phenomena, often occurring simultaneously and repeating at different times and places both day and night, contributed to the case's notoriety and complexity. One of the most distinctive and disturbing aspects of the Enfield case was the occurrence of abusive remarks and vulgarities spoken in a gruff masculine voice, apparently produced most often by Janet and sometimes Margaret. From the SPR's Psi Encyclopedia, quote, "In December 1977, 3 months after the start of the disturbances, an anomalous voice began to emanate from Janet. It started as a series of whistles and dog-like barks and developed into a human voice, that of an elderly male, harsh and guttural, and quite unlike Janet's. To eliminate the possibility that Janet was herself faking the voice, Gross taped up Janet's mouth. The voice continued to be heard, somewhat subdued, as was the case on future occasions when Janet's mouth was also filled with water. Early in January 1978, Margaret started to speak in a similar harsh voice, but without the same intensity or duration as Janet's." End quote. The voice called himself Bill Wilkins and claimed he'd lived and died in the house. From Guy Playfair's book on the case, Bill said, quote, "My name is Bill Wilkins, and I come from Durant's Park, and I am 72 years old, and I have come here to see my family, but they are not here now." End quote. Easy searches online will lead you to audio recorded by Gross and Playfair of Bill allegedly speaking through Janet. In this clip, you will hear Bill answering questions from Richard Gross, Maurice's son, as he interviewed Bill through Janet on Tuesday, the 13th of December, 1977. Bill and Richard spoke about what happened to Bill on the day he died. He's hard to understand, so I'll translate afterward. Here's the audio.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died. Just before you died and just after you died.
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
So to translate, when asked what happened when he died, Bill replied, "Just before I died, I went blind and I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died on a chair in the corner downstairs." A later investigator obtained a death certificate and confirmed that a man named William C.L. Wilkins did pass away at 284 Green Street on June 20th, 1963, but from a coronary thrombosis, essentially a blood clot blocking the coronary artery. Quite different from a hemorrhage where a weakened blood vessel supplying the brain bursts, resulting in a stroke. These details of Bill's life, including his propensity for foul language, were later confirmed in several interviews with Wilkins' family members. According to the SPR's Psi Encyclopedia, in his book The Enfield Poltergeist Tapes, 2019, Melvin Willen details hours of voice recordings from Janet. A contact microphone on the back of her head captured sounds louder and different from her normal voice. A speech therapist consulted by investigators couldn't identify the source or how the voice was sustained, noting a resemblance to a false vocal cord tone. Physicist John Hasted and phonetics expert Adrian Forson conducted tests using a laryngograph, which suggested a condition called plica ventricularis, where throat muscle tension can produce sounds without using the vocal cords. Yet, Janet didn't experience the typical side effects of this condition, such as hoarseness or a sore throat. Ventriloquist Ray Allen believed the voice came from Janet's diaphragm, a view disputed by investigators Gross and Playfair. Gross, convinced of a paranormal origin, offered £500 and later £1,000 to anyone who could replicate the voice under his terms, but no one succeeded. Historical cases of possession where altered voices emerged from people in trance states also strengthened his belief. Similar phenomena have been reported recently. In 2012, Professor Richard E. Gallagher documented a woman, Julia, who entered trances and spoke in voices different from her own. In 2014, police in Indiana investigated LaToya Ammon's children who exhibited signs of demonic possession, including speaking in unnaturally deep voices. Again from the SPR's Psi Encyclopedia, quote, asked in a 2011 newspaper article whether she believed the house was still haunted, Janet said, "Years later, when Mum was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you." Janet, who at this time was age 45, mentioned having been bullied at school as a result of the incidents, being nicknamed Ghost Girl. She also mentioned having played with a Ouija board before the trouble flared up. She said she'd been unaware that she went into trances until shown the photographs. I knew when the voices were happening, of course. It felt like something was behind me all the time. They did all sorts of tests, filling my mouth with water and so on, but the voices still came out. The levitation was scary because you didn't know where you were going to land. I remember a curtain being wound around my neck. I was screaming. I thought I was going to die." End quote. This case does come with its controversy, though, despite all the wacky evidence. Gross and Playfair acknowledged that Margaret and Janet occasionally attempted to deceive them. But these instances were rare and quickly uncovered, with the girls admitting their actions. Janet later claimed they cheated only about 2% of the time. The family and neighbors believed the phenomenon was real, while some skeptics dismissed it after brief visits or without even visiting. Because why investigate if you don't believe in it, right? Media reports sensationalized the events, with skeptical investigators like Anita Gregory and Melvin Harris questioning the girls' behavior and the authenticity of the phenomena. Gross and Playfair defended the investigation, citing technical issues with recording equipment and criticizing media inaccuracies. Despite skepticism, they received support from various witnesses and academic comparisons to Tourette's syndrome. Both remained committed to defending the legitimacy of the Enfield case throughout their careers until their deaths, Gross in 2006 and Playfair in 2018. In a recent, excellently executed Apple TV Plus series on the case, filmmakers used lip-sync technology with actors to recreate the scenes recorded only on audio tape. Still appearing quite haunted, Janet Hodgson spoke in a rare interview in that series. She maintained that what happened to her all those years ago was very real.
Poppycock.
Aww.
But I adore her for keeping us entertained.
I don't know, maybe Janet did have a psychological disorder and she really did believe what was going on there.
Or maybe somebody was doing tricks and she believed it as well. Who knows?
That could have been. Who knows? Anyway, and that's it for Dark Poutine episode 341, Halloween Road Trip, Hauntings, Ghosts, and Poltergeists Around the World. Happy Halloween, and thank you for listening to Dark Poutine for the last 7 years. Hugs.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
So here's our first and only voicemail.
Hi, Mike and Matthew. My name is Stephanie, and I'm calling because I just listened to the latest episode on the ice storm, and I had to call in because I actually survived the ice storm. I was 18 years old at the time, and since our house was only heated through electricity and we had no more power, my parents used the decorative fireplace that we had in the living room to warm the room up. It was not meant to warm the whole house, but at least it got us warm and cozy in the living room. And we put up blankets in the doorway so that to try to contain the heat in the living room as much as possible. We had my grandparents over and my grandma's sister. So my parents put a mattress on the floor, and my grandparents slept on the mattress, and my grandmother's sister slept on the couch, and my brother and I were in sleeping bags on the floor, and so we all did this. Also, another thing that we didn't have was a phone line. The phone lines were also down, so it's a good thing we didn't have any emergencies, so because we wouldn't have been able to call. My dad would go out for every meal. He'd go out and cook our meal outside on the camping stove, and we knew we had to use up all the stuff that was in the freezer. So we were really eating well, eating all the steaks and all the expensive stuff because we knew we were going to have to throw it out after the storm. So we ate really, really well. Also, we had no idea what was going on in other areas of the province. We didn't know the extent of the storm because we didn't have phones, and also we didn't have any batteries to listen to the radio. And we had a subscription to the newspaper, which was delivered to our house daily, but the papers wasn't running either. So we had really no idea the extent of the storm. So that was pretty crazy. So we were without power or phone lines for 4 days, but we were lucky that we were among the ones that got the power restored earliest. Some people went for 3 weeks without the power. So yeah, so that's what I just wanted to share with you guys. Thank you. I love your podcast. Bye.
Oh, that was so nice. And thank you for calling in with your story about the Quebec ice storm. I was wondering if we would get any voicemail from people telling us about their experiences during the ice storm. That's really cool. What I found really neat about her call was how her whole family kind of came together under one roof during that time. That's really neat.
The story of all of them sleeping in the living room because it was the one more room reminds me of massive heat wave we had in the 1970s in Ontario, and we didn't have central air at the time. We had one air conditioning unit in the kitchen window.
Oh, wow.
So I remember spreading out sleeping bags, didn't need to get into them, and all four of us slept on the kitchen floor because it was the only cool room.
Oh, wow.
So it's just the opposite of ice. It was heat. And I also want to know if Stephanie, like Meredith's boyfriend, had a duck in the freezer or not.
A duck, yeah. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. All right, we do have some Patreon and Donut Money donors. So first up, as far as Patreon goes, we have Ashley Corey, and Ashley is from a wonderfully named place, Swan Lake, Manitoba. Swan Lake.
Swan Lake, Manitoba.
So I wonder what Ashley does there in Swan Lake, Matthew.
You know those swan-shaped paddle boat?
Yes.
She owns a swan-shaped paddle boat company.
Well, what a great thing.
Did you know that in the UK all swans are owned by
the Queen?
The Queen, now the King.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm still in the habit of saying the Queen because, it's strange because we've had a king for a number of years now. However, we had Queen E2, QE2 for a long time.
Yeah, the Queen of Canada was from before you and I were born until a couple of years ago. So it's not surprising that we mentioned the Queen before we mentioned the King of Canada.
Yeah, no offense, Chuck, if you're listening.
Yeah, just stick in there, and we'll switch it over soon.
We could use some royal donut money. Anyway, yeah, so that's cool. So Ashley, enjoy your Swan Lake boat business.
Thank you, Ashley.
It's great. Next we have Peter Bernstead, and Peter is from where I lived at one point, Maple Ridge, British Columbia.
Peter Bernstead.
Yeah, and what does Peter do in Maple Ridge?
I don't know why, but the first thing that came to my mind was that he has a comic strip in the Sunday papers.
Oh, well, there you go. Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of nice. Are the characters funny or sort of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Funny characters, right?
The funny papers.
Yeah. So he's famous in the funny papers.
Well, that's nice. We do have some Donut Money donors all the way from the UK. We have Steve Heaton again.
Yay.
He says, hello again from jolly old England. Top-notch work, old boys. Buy yourself a cup of tea and a scone. Toodle pip and tally-ho from your loyal Englishman, Steve Heaton. Steve Heaton. P.S. We don't really speak like that, as Matthew knows. So go shit in a top hat, lads. All the best.
We don't really speak like that. In it.
In it. We don't really speak like that. In it.
In it. That's really how we speak.
Yeah.
Oi, geezer.
I don't remember what job we gave Steve Heaton, so maybe he's moved on from that one and he's doing something different now.
He's an elocutionist.
He's an elocutionist in it.
Yeah.
British memes. There's like a British memes Twitter thing that I follow. It's really funny. Anyway, bum.
Bum.
One of my favorite English words, bum. Next up, we have Russ Warren. Not only do I not know where Russ is, what Russ does, I don't know where he is either. So Russ Warren.
Russ is in Liverpool.
Oh, really? Liverpool, England, or Liverpool, Nova Scotia?
England.
Oh, okay.
But his parents were from Liverpool, Nova Scotia.
Oh, fair enough. Interesting.
Yeah, they immigrated to the UK.
Yeah, it's probably a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And what does Russ do there in Liverpool?
He owns a butcher shop.
Oh, he's a butcher.
Yes, but of game.
Game, oh.
Deer and...
Yes.
That's why after they moved over there, they thought, you know what? There's a lot of good Canadian game that you can't get in the UK. So they import from Canada and then butcher it there.
When I used to smoke the devil's lettuce, I had a thought one time. Surprisingly, I had a thought. And that thought was, if goose are geese, why are moose not meese?
Yeah, you were high.
Yes, I was. Very. And I also discovered that if you write Subaru backwards, you get you are a bus.
You know, I knew somebody once that was telling me he was eating edibles.
Yeah.
And he got so high that he was putting the towel under the door. so the neighbors couldn't smell the weed, only to realize while he was doing it that he was eating edibles and there was no smoke. And he said he laughed for about half an hour so hard he couldn't get
himself.
off the floor.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Thanks to all our patrons and donut money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, please check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you took the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening, and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing.
That's it for this time, and we'll be back in November. And yeah, I just want to say again, thank you for sticking with Dark Poutine for the last 7 years. And happy Halloween. And go poop in your toques. Also, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple. Bye, folks.
Bobbing for apples.
Oh, dear. Bye.